The first sign that something was off wasn't the man waiting outside. It was Evelyn's dress. She never dressed up for me anymore. That was the first thing I noticed, how the deep red fabric clung to her in a way that felt deliberate. How her makeup was just a little too perfect. How she moved with an energy I hadn't seen in years. She was glowing, and not because of me. I was sitting at the dining table, absently pushing my fork around my plate, when she walked past me toward the door. She didn't even glance at me, just reached for her coat, like she had somewhere better to be. "Where are you going?" I asked, setting my fork down. Evelyn paused, her fingers still gripping the coat rack. "Out," she said simply. That single word had more weight than anything she'd said to me in months. "With who?" I pressed. She sighed, finally turning to face me like I was some needy inconvenience. "His name is Nolan." I frowned. "I don't know any Nolan." "You don't need to," she said, slipping her arms into her coat. A slow, uneasy feeling crawled up my spine. "Evelyn," I said carefully, "are you seriously telling me you're going on a date?" She rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. "Don't be ridiculous." But then she reached for her purse, and that's when I heard it, the sound of footsteps outside. I stood up so fast, my chair scraped against the floor. I strode toward the window, pushing the curtain aside just enough to see. There he was, a man I had never seen before, standing at the edge of our driveway. Hands in his pockets, a relaxed smirk on his face. He wasn't just picking her up, he was waiting for her. Something in my stomach twisted. "Evelyn," I said again, my voice lower this time. She exhaled sharply like I was exhausting her. "I told you I'm going out." I turned back to her. With him, she looked at me unimpressed. "Yes." The bluntness of it knocked the breath from my lungs. I searched her face for hesitation, for guilt. Anything to suggest this wasn't exactly what it looked like. But there was nothing, just mild annoyance, like I was keeping her from something important. "Are you serious?" I asked. "Evelyn." Let out another sigh, rubbing her temple. "Look, Callum, I didn't want to have this conversation tonight. I was hoping you'd be mature enough to handle it." I almost laughed. "Handle what, this?" She gestured vaguely between us. "The fact that I need more than this." She said it like this. Our life, our marriage. Me wasn't enough for her anymore. I stared at her, trying to wrap my head around what was happening. "You're cheating on me. Don't be so dramatic," she said. "Then what would you call it?" Evelyn grabbed her purse and smoothed down her dress, exploring my options. The words hit me like a slap. "Exploring your—" I cut myself off, my hands balling into fists at my sides. "You're my wife, Evelyn." "For now," she said, checking her phone. That was it. The moment I realized I had already lost her. She had checked out of our marriage long before this conversation. I just hadn't noticed that Evelyn moved toward the door, but I stepped in front of it. "Move," she said flatly. "No," I said. She lifted an eyebrow. "I wasn't asking." I exhaled sharply, running a hand through my hair. "Do you even hear yourself? You're walking out of our home to his car like this is normal?" Evelyn crossed her arms. "It's normal for people who aren't stuck in the past." I clenched my jaw. "You're my wife." She tilted her head. "Considering, maybe, but tonight I'm his." And with that, she pushed past me, opened the door, and walked straight into another man's waiting arms. I stood frozen in the doorway, gripping the frame as I watched my wife slip into his car. Without a second glance, and I realized I wasn't losing her, I had already lost her. The house felt hollow without her. The moment the car disappeared down the street, I stood in the doorway, gripping the frame like it was the only thing keeping me upright. The cold air from outside seeped in, wrapping around me, but I barely noticed. My mind was spinning, caught, somewhere between disbelief and something dangerously close to rage. I closed the door slowly, like I was trying to contain the mess she had just made. But no matter how hard I tried to convince myself that this wasn't real, that she'd come back and tell me it was some kind of twisted joke, I knew better. Evelyn had left, and she wasn't looking back. I paced the length of the living room, my mind racing with questions I didn't have answers to. Had she been planning this for weeks? Months? How long had she been sneaking around, making excuses, acting like I was the fool in some game she thought she had already won? My phone was on the coffee table. I picked it up, hesitated, then opened our messages. There was nothing in them that hinted at this: no confessions, no warnings, just the normal, everyday exchanges between a husband and wife. Me: hey, don't forget to pick up the dry cleaning on your way home, Evelyn. Got it, me? What do you want for dinner tonight, Evelyn? Not hungry? Late meeting. Late meeting. I should have caught it then. My grip tightened around the phone. My heart pounded against my ribs as something dark crept into my thoughts. Was this really the first time? Or had she been walking out that door for a long time while I sat here blind and comfortable? The idea burned in my chest. I needed to get out of the house. I grabbed my keys and jacket, not entirely sure where. I was going, only knowing I couldn't sit here and pretend everything was fine. My car rumbled to life, the sound cutting through the silence of the empty driveway. As I backed out, my eyes flicked to the spot where Gregor's car had been. The ghost of it lingered there, mocking me. I pulled onto the road, driving aimlessly, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I didn't have a destination, just a desperate need to move. The thought of Evelyn laughing with him, touching him, looking at him the way she used to look at me, sent a wave of nausea rolling through me. The realization hit me like a punch. I couldn't just sit here and wonder. I needed to know. I opened her location on my phone, and there it was, a small, blinking dot, a betrayal wrapped in pixels. A restaurant. A nice one, the kind we hadn't been to in years. A cold, bitter laugh escaped my lips. She had told me we needed to save. Money, that we should stop going out so much, that home-cooked meals were better. But here she was, sitting in a dimly lit booth, drinking overpriced wine with another man. I shouldn't have gone. I should have turned around, let her make her choice, let her believe I was too broken to react. But something inside me wouldn't. Let me. 15 minutes later, I was parked across the street from the restaurant. Through the wide glass windows, I saw them. Evelyn was leaning forward, her chin resting on her hand, her eyes locked onto Gregor like he was the most fascinating person in the world. She was smiling, laughing, even a sound I hadn't heard in months. I felt like I had been erased, like I had already disappeared from her life and she was just waiting for the paperwork to catch up. My hands curled into fists. This wasn't just a date, it was a statement. And suddenly, I wasn't sure if I was ready for what came next. I should have left. I should have turned the key, driven back home, and let Evelyn have whatever fantasy she was chasing. But I didn't. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, watching through the rain-speckled windshield as my wife smiled at another man like I had never existed. It wasn't the kind of smile you give a friend, or even someone you're just getting to know. No, this was intimate, teasing, full of something she hadn't shown me in years. The way she leaned in, the way she let him brush a stray hair from her face, it made my stomach churn. That used to be me. That used to be my place. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips, my breath coming faster than it should. I wasn't angry, at least not in the way I expected to be. I was numb, detached, like I was watching a movie about someone else's life, and I already knew how it ended. She had chosen. But did she think I would just sit back and let her? I forced myself to take a breath, to steady my hands. If I walked into that restaurant, what would I even say? That I'd caught her? That I had proof of what she hadn't even tried to hide? No, that wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to see it with my own eyes. I pushed open my car door, stepping out into the cold evening air. A part of me hoped she would look up, that her eyes would find mine through the window, and that she would show some flicker of guilt, some recognition that I was still here, that I wasn't just a shadow in the life she had already left behind. But she never looked, not once. I walked toward the restaurant entrance, keeping my movements slow, deliberate. I wasn't crashing this date I was observing. I wanted to see how far she would go when she thought no one was watching. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of steak and expensive wine. Couples filled the dimly lit booths, the sound of soft jazz playing overhead. I moved carefully, keeping myself in the shadows, slipping into an empty bar seat where I had the perfect view of their table without being noticed. Evelyn was talking, her hands moving as she spoke, her face alive, in a way that had been missing for years. Gregor was watching her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, nodding, smiling, leaning in just enough to show that he knew exactly what he was doing. And then I saw it, his hand on her knee. She didn't move away. She didn't hesitate. She placed her own hand over his, locking her fingers with his like it was the most natural thing in the world. I swallowed hard. So this was it. The confirmation I had been waiting for. The moment I could no longer lie to myself. My wife wasn't just exploring her options. She was already gone. The bartender approached, asking if I wanted a drink. It waved him off, my mind too tangled to care about anything but the scene in front of me. What was I supposed to do? Make a scene? Confront her here, in front of everyone? What would that accomplish? I wanted her to feel something, to realize the weight of what she was doing. But she was laughing, not a nervous laugh, not one filled with hesitation, a real, genuine laugh, like she hadn't laughed in years. And suddenly I wasn't sure what hurt more, the fact that she was cheating, or the fact that she was happy. I sat there for another 10 minutes, watching a version of my wife I hadn't seen in forever. A version that wasn't mine anymore. And then, before I could stop myself, I did something I never thought I would do. I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture of them, of their intertwined hands, of her smile. Proof. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. I drove home in silence, the kind of silence that isn't peaceful, but suffocating. The kind that crawls under your skin and latches onto your thoughts like a parasite. My fingers gripped the steering wheel tighter than they needed to, my knuckles white, but I barely noticed. The only thing I saw was that image burned into my mind, Evelyn laughing, her hand on his, her whole body leaning into him like she had never belonged to me. I should have felt rage. I should have been consumed by its screaming, breaking things, demanding an explanation that I already knew wouldn't change anything. But I wasn't angry. I was empty. For the past few years, I had been holding on to a ghostly version of Evelyn that had once loved me, that had chosen me, that had built a life with me. I had convinced myself that she was still in there somewhere, that if I just tried harder, if I just became more of what she needed, she would come back to me. But tonight, sitting across the street from that restaurant, I finally saw the truth. She wasn't coming back by the time I pulled into the driveway. The house felt foreign, like it wasn't mine anymore, like I was just visiting a place where someone else had lived, where memories were carved into the walls, but had long since faded. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. And for the first time, I truly understood what loneliness felt like. The smell of her perfume still lingered in the air. The faint sound of the clock ticking in the hallway was deafening. I walked into the kitchen, half expecting to see her there, cooking or pouring herself a glass of wine. But the space was empty, just like the rest of the house. I sat at the dining table, my mind replaying every moment of the night in perfect clarity. The way she had ignored me, the way she had walked past me without hesitation, the way she had sat across from him, touched him, given him all the pieces of her she had refused to give me. Then, almost absent-mindedly, I pulled out my phone. The picture was still there, a single frame, capturing the exact moment my marriage died, her fingers laced with his, her lips curled in a smile that wasn't for me. A snapshot of a life she had already started building without me. I stared at it for a long time. I could delete it, pretend I'd never seen it, go to bed and wake up in the morning like nothing had changed. But something had, and no amount of pretending would make it go away. Without thinking, I tapped on our messages. For a moment I just hovered there, my thumb resting over the keyboard, my thoughts tangled. What was I supposed to say? That I knew, that I had seen everything, that I had been sitting in the same damn restaurant, invisible to her, while she threw away years of our life like it was nothing. Then, before I could stop myself, I typed, "I hope he was worth it." I stared at the words for a long time, then, with a deep breath, hit send. The message delivered instantly. No read receipt, no response. Just silence. I leaned back in my chair, running a hand over my face, exhaling slowly. Maybe she wouldn't reply. Maybe she would see it, roll her eyes, and go back to whatever fantasy she was living in. Or maybe, just maybe, she would feel something. I wasn't sure what I wanted anymore. An apology, an explanation, revenge. None of it would change the fact that she had already left me long before tonight. I stood up, my body heavy with exhaustion, and made my way to the bedroom. It still smelled like Hertha sheets, the pillows, even the air itself carried the ghost of her presence. I climbed into bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for sleep that I knew wouldn't come. Then, just as I was starting to drift into the restless haze of my thoughts, my phone buzzed. A single message from Evelyn. "You don't understand." I stared at it, my pulse quickened, my mind racing with possibilities. But before I could type a response, another message appeared. "We need to talk." I didn't sleep, how could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her, not the Evelyn I had loved, but the one I had watched across that restaurant, looking at another man like I had never existed. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind tangled in a storm of questions. I wasn't sure I wanted answers to. Her message sat on my phone like a ticking bomb. "You don't understand." Understand what? That she had checked out of our marriage a long time ago. That I was nothing more than a leftover piece of her past, while she built a new future with someone else. I had spent years trying to understand her, to meet her halfway, to be the husband she needed me to be. In the end, it hadn't mattered. Her second message came not long after. "We need to talk." I didn't respond. Not at first. Let her wonder for once. Let her sit in the silence and think about what she had done. Maybe she expected me to beg, to ask her to come home, to be the weak, predictable man she had grown tired of. But I wasn't going to play that role anymore. By morning, my body felt like it had been run through a grinder. My muscles ached, my head pounded, and my chest was hollow. The house felt different now, like a place I no longer belonged. Every room carried echoes of her perfume lingering in the air. Her hairbrush still on the bathroom counter, the half-empty coffee mug she had left in the sink the night before. I moved through the house in a daze, making coffee I didn't want, staring at my phone without really seeing it. Then, at 8:32 a.m., she called. I let it ring. She called again and again. By the fourth time, something inside me snapped. I answered, my voice rough from exhaustion. "What?" For a moment, there was silence. Maybe she hadn't expected me to pick up. Maybe she had prepared herself for voicemail, rehearsed some speech she thought would smooth everything over. Then she exhaled a slow, shaky breath. Hearing her say my name did something to me. It felt foreign now, like it belonged to someone else, like I wasn't the same man she had once said it to with love. "You what?" I asked, my voice flat. She hesitated. "Can we meet?" I almost laughed. Meet? As if we were business partners settling a dispute, as if last night hadn't happened, as if she hadn't walked out of our home and into another man's arms like I didn't matter. "No," I said. "Callum, you wanted this, Evelyn?" "Don't act surprised now." Her breath hitched. "You don't even know the full story." I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. "The full story? You mean the part where you held his hand? Or the part where you laughed like you were on the best date of your life?" Silence. I let it stretch between us, let her sit in the weight of it. Then finally she spoke. "That's not what you think." A bitter chuckle escaped me. "Oh, that's original. Please," she whispered. "Just meet me." Should have said no. Should have told her to go to hell, to figure out her mess without dragging me back into it. But a part of Mitha, part that still wanted answers, that still hadn't fully let go, said something else. "Fine," I muttered. 1 hour? Our usual spot. I hung up before she could say another word. The coffee shop was almost empty when I arrived. It was one of those places we used to go when we were first dating, back when life was simple, before everything became complicated. The thought made me sick now. Evelyn was already there, sitting by the window, her hands wrapped around a cup she hadn't touched. When she saw me, her face lit up with something close to relief, but I didn't return it. I took the seat across from her, arms crossed, waiting. She studied me for a long moment. It's like she was searching for something in my expression. You look exhausted. Yeah. Well, finding out your wife has a boyfriend does that to you? She flinched, then looked down at her coffee. It's not like that, I scoffed. Then tell me, Evelyn, what is it like? She swallowed hard. I didn't plan for this to happen. Oh, that makes it so much better, I said, voice dripping with sarcasm. Her eyes snapped up to meet mine, frustration flickering in them. Can you just let me explain? I sat back, arms still crossed. Go ahead, explain. She took a deep breath. Gregor is different. He makes me feel alive again. Something cold settled in my stomach, and I don't. She winced. It's not that simple. It is to me. She exhaled, shaking her head. Else felt lost for a long time. Callum and I tried to ignore it. I did, but something was missing, and when I met Gregor, I held up a hand. Stop. Just stop. Because I didn't need to hear this. I didn't need to sit across from the woman I had given everything to and listen to her tell me that I wasn't enough. Why are we even here, Evelyn? I asked. My voice suddenly tired. What do you want from me? She hesitated. I don't know. I let out a dry laugh. Wow, that's really something. She faltered. I don't want to lose you completely. I froze. The sheer audacity of it knocked the breath from my lungs. You don't want to lose me? I repeated slowly, my voice dangerously quiet. Evelyn, you lost me the second you got into his car. She looked like she wanted to argue, to say something that would make this easier for her. But she didn't, because she knew I was right. I stood up, pushing the chair back. I hope he makes you happy. Callum, I walked out before she could finish. And for the first time in years, I realized I didn't have to. The air outside the cafe felt different. Maybe it was the weight of everything that had just happened, or maybe it was the realization that I was finally seeing Evelyn for who she really was. Either way, I stood there for a long moment, staring at my reflection in the window, watching. Her still sitting inside, hands wrapped around a coffee cup she never touched. She looked like a stranger, for years. I had been holding on to a version of her that no longer existed, the woman I had married. The one who used to laugh at my stupid jokes, who used to hold my hand just because she wanted to, who used to look at me like I was the only person in the world. She was gone. I had been clinging to the ghost of our past, convincing myself that if I just tried hard enough, I could bring her back. But ghosts don't come back, and Evelyn, she had been gone. Long before she ever walked out that door, I didn't go home right away. I couldn't. The house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a museum of a life that had already ended. So instead I drove. No destination, no plan, just the hum of the engine and the blur of streetlights passing by. I thought about all the times I had ignored the signs, the late nights, the work trips, the way she had slowly pulled away without ever saying a word. Had she ever really loved me? Or had I just been convenient? The question burned in the back of my mind, but I already knew the answer at some point. I ended up parked outside my best friend's house. Tobias, he was the kind of guy who always had an answer for everything, whether you wanted to hear it or not. And right now, I needed someone to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. I knocked twice before he swung the door open, blinking at me like he wasn't sure if I was real. Callum, yeah. My voice was rough, like I hadn't spoken in hours. His eyes flicked to my face, taking in whatever mess he saw there. Then he stepped aside. Come in. I walked in, the familiar smell of beer and takeout hitting me immediately. His apartment was the same as it always was, comfortable, slightly chaotic. It's a kind of place where nothing felt out of place because everything was. He shut the door behind me, then crossed his arms. You look like hell. I let out a short, bitter laugh. I feel worse. He studied me for a second before nodding toward the couch. Sit, talk. I dropped onto the couch, running a hand through my hair. She's been cheating. Tobias didn't look surprised, not even a little. Yeah, I figured. I snapped my head up. What? He sighed, running a hand over his face. I didn't have proof, man, but I saw things. The way she acted, the way she treated you, she was never present. It was like she was waiting for an excuse to leave. A slow sinking feeling settled in my stomach. He didn't tell me? He looked at me, his expression unreadable. Would you have believed me? I opened my mouth, ready to argue. But then I stopped because he was right. So much time making excuses for her, convincing myself that if I just gave her space, if I just held on a little longer, things would go back to how they used to be. But they never would. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. Wanted to meet, said I didn't understand. Tobias snorted. Yeah. Understand what that she's a selfish piece of. I cut him off with a shake of my head. She said she doesn't want to lose me completely. He stared at me. Then very calmly he reached for the beer on the table, took a long sip and said, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." I laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. Yeah, pretty much. She walks out, cheats on you, rubs it in your face, and now she doesn't want to lose you? He leaned back, shaking his head. Callum, that's not love. That's control. She wants to keep you on the hook while she does whatever the hell she wants. I knew that, deep down. I had always known that. But hearing it out loud made it feel real in a way I hadn't been ready for. Tobias studied me for a second, then asked, "So what are you going to do?" I exhaled, leaning back against the couch. I don't know. Here's an idea. He sat forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Don't give her what she wants. I frowned. What do you mean? She wants to keep you in her life, right? Keep you as the safety net, the backup plan? Don't let her. He gestured. Vaguely, cut her off. Take your life back. Hell, change the locks while you're at it. I rubbed a hand over my face. It's not that simple. Yeah, it is. Gave me a look. You think she hesitated before screwing around behind your back? You think she sat there agonizing over whether or not it was the right thing to do? No, she did what she wanted. And now you need to do what you want. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I actually let myself consider that. What if I stopped caring? What if I stopped waiting for her to decide what she wanted and started deciding for myself? I had spent so much time fighting for a marriage that only one of us had been holding on to. Maybe it was time to let go. I stood up. I need to go. Home. Tobias raised an eyebrow. You good? Not yet. I grabbed my keys. But I will be. As I drove back, something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to chase after her. Evelyn had made her choice, and now I was making mine. I pulled into the driveway, gripping the steering wheel as I stared at the house that no longer felt like mine. The lights were still off, the same way I had left them, but something felt different. It was me. Maybe it was the realization that I had spent so long trying to hold on to something that had already slipped through my fingers. I stepped out of the car, my footsteps heavy as I walked toward the front door. My keys jingled in my hand, but just as I reached for the lock, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting another message from Evelina. Attempt to explain the unexplainable, but it wasn't her. It was my mother. I hesitated before answering. She was the last person I wanted to talk to right now, not because I didn't love her, but because she would hear it in my voice, the weight, the exhaustion, the unraveling of everything I had built. Still, I answered. Hey, Mom. Was quiet for a moment before she spoke, her voice gentle. You okay, sweetheart? I closed my eyes. She already knew. I hadn't told her, but she knew. No, I admitted. Not really. Another pause. Then, do you want to talk about it? I wanted to say no, wanted to pretend that I had it all under control. But the truth was, I didn't. And for once, didn't have the energy to lie. She's cheating, I said, the words tasting foreign in my mouth. I saw her. She didn't even try to hide it. A sharp inhale from the other end of the line. Oh, Callum. I sat down on the front steps, running a hand through my hair. She said she doesn't want to lose me. Completely that she wants me in her life. I laughed, but it was hollow. It's like I'm supposed to just stick around while she does whatever she wants. My mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something I hadn't expected. Do you remember when you were little and you had that old toy truck? I frowned. What? The red one? You loved it so much that even when the wheels broke, you kept trying to fix it. You refused to let it go, even when it didn't work anymore. I blinked, the memory rushing back. That stupid truck. I had carried it everywhere, even after it was nothing more than a shell of what it used to be. She continued, her voice steady. I remember one day your father sat you down and said, "Callum, sometimes things break in a way that can't be fixed. And when that happens, holding on to them only hurts you more." I swallowed hard, staring at the cracks in the pavement. Beneath my feet, "She's broken this, honey," my mother said gently, "and you can't fix it alone." Tears burned the back of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "I know," I whispered. And for the first time I really did. The house was cold when I stepped inside, but I barely noticed. My body moved on autopilot, walking through the darkened rooms, past the framed pictures that suddenly felt like artifacts from another life. I stopped in the hallway, staring at the wedding photo hanging on the wall. Evelyn was smiling, her arms wrapped around me, her eyes full of something that had long since disappeared. I reached out, my fingers brushing over the glass. Then, without thinking, I pulled it off the wall. For a moment, I just held it. Then slowly, I turned it over, opened the back, and slid the photo out. The empty frame felt lighter in my hands, placed it face down on the console table, and walked away. There are moments in life when time slows down, not in a poetic, cinematic way, but in a way that feels like the universe itself is forcing you to absorb every second. This was one of those moments. Lorna stood in front of the hallway mirror, adjusting the strap of her red dress, her reflection smirking back at her. She barely glanced at me as she picked up her purse, casually tossing out the words that would turn my world upside down. "I'm off on a date. Try not to be too jealous." For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. Maybe she was joking. Maybe this was some bizarre, twisted attempt at humor. But then I saw the way she shifted her weight, the way she deliberately avoided my gaze, and I knew this wasn't a joke. My mouth went dry. My fingers gripped the edge of the kitchen counter as my mind scrambled for an explanation, something that could make sense of the absurdity of what I had just heard. "Excuse me?" said finally, my voice steadier than I expected. Lorna let out a soft sigh, as if she was already exhausted by the conversation. "You heard me," she said, flipping her hair over her shoulder. "I have plans tonight with someone else." It wasn't just the words. It was how she said them so effortlessly, so unapologetically, as if this was completely normal, as if she had every right to stand in front of me wearing a dress I had bought for her, and announce that she was going on a date. A date. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. I should have yelled, should have demanded answers. I should have done something. But all I did was stand there, staring at the woman I thought I knew, realizing in real time that I didn't know her at all. I forced a slow breath. "I suppose you expect me to just accept this?" Her lips curved into that smirk again, the one that had once felt playful, charming. Now it felt cruel. "I expect you to be an adult about it," she said, as if she were explaining something obvious. "We've been together for years, right? Marriage gets boring. Just want to experience more options." I let out a breathless laugh, but there was no humor in it. My pulse was pounding in my ears, and yet outwardly I was calm to calm. "So let me get this straight," I said, my voice level. "You're just openly seeing someone else now, without discussion, without even pretending to care what. I think—" She shrugged, like she was talking about returning a sweater she didn't like. "I figured you'd find out sooner or later," she said. "So why hide it? It's not like I'm leaving you." That's when something inside me clicked. I had been standing on the edge of denial, waiting for her to give me a reason to believe this was some kind of misunderstanding. But it wasn't. Lorna wasn't sorry. She wasn't even hesitant. She had already made her decision. Now it was my turn to make mine. Something told me that by the time the night was over, she wouldn't be smirking anymore. I watched her standing there, adjusting her dress in the mirror like nothing was wrong. Like she hadn't just shattered the very foundation of our marriage with a casual smirk and a few thoughtless words. A date. She was going on a date with someone else. My heartbeat was eerily steady, my mind sharper than it should have been in a moment like this. A part of me was waiting for anger to explode, to take over, to shake the walls of this house with the force of my reaction. But it didn't come. Not yet. Instead, I felt awake. I had spent the last few years in a comfortable haze. moving through life like a man who thought he had it all figured out. I wasn't the guy who checked his wife's phone or questioned her whereabouts or played the role of the paranoid. Jealous husband, I trusted her. I had no reason not to, until now. Lorna sighed, turning her gaze back to me, clearly irritated that I hadn't reacted in the way she expected. "What?" she said, shifting her purse to the other shoulder. "You're acting weird." Weird. I wanted to laugh. Maybe I even did a dry, empty sound leaving my throat. "How long?" I asked instead, my voice eerily even. She blinked. "How long what?" I gave her a slow, pointed look. "How long have you been doing this behind my back?" Lorna rolled her eyes, as if I were being so dramatic, as if I had just asked her. "Something as mundane as what's for dinner?" "Don't be like that," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "It's not a big deal." Not a big deal. The words bounced around my skull, echoing over and over until I wasn't sure if I had even heard them. Right. I inhaled deeply, gripping the back of the chair in front of me. "Not a big deal?" I repeated, tilting my head. "You walking out that door? Meeting another man? Letting him touch you the way I do? That's not a big deal?" Her lips parted slightly, like she was about to say something, but then she hesitated just for a second. Just enough for me to see it. The flicker of guilt buried beneath all that arrogance. But just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. She rolled her shoulders back, her usual smugness returning in full force. "I didn't say it wasn't important," she said, her voice smooth, controlled. "I'm just saying that this is life. People evolve, relationships change, and frankly, you should be grateful I'm being honest about it." Grateful. The sheer audacity of it made my jaw tighten. I studied her, taking in the way she looked at me like I was beneath her, like she had already. Moved past this moment, past me, past everything we had built together. And that's when I knew she had been preparing for this. Maybe not this exact conversation, but the moment where she would finally stop pretending, finally say the words out loud, finally make it real. I took a slow step forward. She didn't flinch, didn't look away. "You're not the woman." "I'm married," I said quietly. Her smirk widened like she'd been waiting for me to say that. "Of course not," she said, her tone light, casual. "People change. I've changed. Maybe you should too." It was like she was talking to a stranger, like I was the one being unreasonable here. I exhaled through my nose, keeping my emotions on lockdown. "And what exactly do you expect me to do with this information, Lorna?" Her brows lifted as if the answer was obvious. "I expect you to accept it." She took another step toward the door, glancing at her watch. Checking the time like this was just another appointment in her day, like that was just another obligation. She had to get through before moving on to more exciting things. She had already made up her mind, and now so had I. I straightened my posture, going rigid, my hands unclenching. "Go," I said simply. That caught her off guard. Her head tilted slightly, her lips parting in surprise. She hadn't expected that. "You're okay with this?" I smiled, not the kind of smile she was used to. "No," I admitted, "but you already made your choice. Now it's my turn." Lorna hesitated, her fingers twitching slightly at her side. For the first time tonight, she looked nervous. "Good." She turned without another word and walked out the door, leaving behind a silence so thick it felt suffocating. I didn't move for a long time. I didn't rage, didn't break anything, just stood there, my mind racing faster than it ever had before, because while she thought she was the one in control of this situation, she had no idea what was coming next. And by the time I was finished, she wouldn't be smirking anymore. The silence stretched around me long after the door clicked shut. It wasn't just a regular silence. It was the kind that seeps into your bones, the kind that makes a place you once loved feel unfamiliar, almost haunted. Lorna had walked out like she hadn't just ripped our marriage apart with a smirk and a few careless words. "I'm off on a date. Try not to be too jealous." The sentence kept playing in my head, over and over like a broken record. Each time I replayed it, the weight in my chest grew heavier. I looked around the house, the home we had built together, the framed photos on the walls, the scent of her perfume still lingering in the air, the half-empty coffee mug on the counter from earlier that morning. Everything felt the same, and yet nothing did. I sank into one of the dining chairs, rubbing my temples as my mind raced. How long had she been planning this? How long had I been living in blissful ignorance, thinking we were just another married couple navigating the usual ups and downs? Had she been seeing this other guy for weeks, months, years? I wanted to be angry, to feel the kind of rage that would make me punch a hole in the wall, break something, scream into the void. But I didn't feel any of that. All I felt was clarity. She had made her choice, and now, for the first time in a long time, I had a choice too. Most men in my position would have confronted their wife immediately. They'd demand answers, demand the truth, maybe even beg for an explanation. But I wasn't going to do that. Lorna wanted me to react. She wanted a scene. She wanted to see me unravel, to see me prove that I was the pathetic, predictable husband she had already written off in her mind. I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. Instead, I took a slow breath and reached for my phone. I wasn't. Calling her no, that would have been too easy. Instead, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in a long time. "Hey, it's me," I said when the line picked up. A pause, then a familiar voice. "Eli, duh." I hadn't spoken to my brother in over a year, not because of some dramatic falling out, but because life had simply pulled us in different directions. He had moved out of state, built a life of his own, while I had sunk deeper and deeper into the routine of marriage, of work, of responsibilities. "I need a favor," I said, cutting straight to the point. Another pause. "What kind of favor?" I hesitated, gripping the phone tighter. "I just need to get out of here for a bit," Eli exhaled. "You okay? Was I?" I wasn't sure, but I wasn't about to explain everything over the phone. "Not really," I admitted, "but I will be." There was silence. On the other end, then finally, "Come on over." I hung up, grabbed my keys, and walked out the door, not bothering to lock it behind me. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if I'd be coming back. The drive to Eli's house was longer than I remembered, giving me too much time alone with my thoughts. Lorna had never been the kind of woman to settle for an average life. She always wanted more excitement, more adventure, more attention. Maybe I had been blind to it before, or maybe I had just convinced myself that I was enough for her. Clearly I wasn't. By the time I pulled into Eli's driveway, my decision was already made. I wasn't going to chase her. I wasn't going to fight for a woman who had already walked away from me in her mind long before she walked out that door. Tonight I was going to do something she'd never expected. I was going to let her go. Something told me that in the end, she would regret it more than I ever would. I sat in my car for a while before knocking on Eli's door. The hum of the engine was the only sound in the otherwise quiet street. It felt strange. This wasn't where I was supposed to be on a night like this. I should have been at home, maybe watching a late-night show with Lorna, or reading in bed while she scrolled through her phone. But instead, I was here. I took a deep breath, my fingers tightening around the steering wheel. Part of me wanted to turn back, drive home, pretend none of this was happening. But I knew better. Lorna had made sure of that. She wanted me to be powerless. That's what this was all about, wasn't it? The smirk, the casual dismissal, the way she had strutted out the door without a second thought. She wanted me to feel like I had no control over what was happening in my own marriage, but she was wrong. I wasn't some lost puppy waiting for her to come home. I wasn't going to crumble under the weight of her choices. No. If she thought she had control over how this story played out, she was dead wrong. I finally stepped out of the car and knocked twice. The door swung open almost immediately, and Eli stood there in a hoodie and sweatpants, looking at me like I had just shown up from another planet. "Well, this is unexpected," he said, stepping aside. I walked in, taking in the familiar surroundings. It had been over a year since I'd last been here, and yet nothing had changed. The same old leather couch, the same stack of books on the coffee table, the faint scent of coffee lingering in the air. Eli shut the door and studied me. "All right," he said, crossing his arms. "What's going on?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "Lorna's cheating on me." The words felt foreign in my mouth, like they belonged to someone else's story. Eli's expression darkened. Are you sure? Scoffed. She told me herself. He blinked. She told you? No. Not in a confession kind of way, I said bitterly. More like a mocking kind of way. She stood in front of me, put on a dress, and said she was going on a date. Just like that. No shame, no hesitation. Eli let out a low whistle. Wow, that's... Yeah, I exhaled sharply, sinking onto the couch. That's where I'm at right now. For a while, he didn't say anything. He just sat across from me, tapping his fingers against his knee, thinking. Finally, he spoke. So, what now? I had been waiting for that question. That was the thing about betrayal. At first, it knocks the air out of you, leaves you feeling hollow, directionless. But after the initial shock fades, you're left with a choice. Be the victim or take control. I refused to be the victim. I leaned forward, meeting Eli's gaze. I'm not chasing her, I said. I'm not fighting for her. I'm not begging her to stay. I'm just done. Eli raised an eyebrow, just like that. I shrugged. What's the alternative? Sit around and wait for her to come home, pretending everything's fine. Try to win her back while she's off entertaining someone else. He nodded slowly. You're right. She doesn't deserve that. No, she doesn't, I agreed. And yet, there was a part of me that still felt the weight of it, all not just the betrayal itself, but the sheer casualness of it. She hadn't even tried to hide it. She had looked me in the eye and dared me to react. That wasn't just infidelity, that was cruelty. And cruelty like that didn't come from nowhere. She's been planning this, I realized out loud. Eli frowned. What do you mean? I ran a hand down my face, piecing things together. She didn't just wake up today and decide to cheat. She's been pulling away for months, staying late at work, making excuses, treating me like an afterthought. This wasn't impulsive, it was calculated. That realization should have made me feel worse, but strangely it didn't. It made me angry, because suddenly, I wasn't just some guy whose wife cheated on him. I was a man whose wife had spent months orchestrating his downfall, and she had expected me to just sit back and take it. Just as I was about to say something else, my phone buzzed. I pulled it out, my stomach twisting slightly when I saw the name on the screen. Lorna.Eli leaned forward.
Hi.
Are you going to answer that?
I
stared at the screen for a long moment. Then finally, I swiped to open the message. Hey, don't wait up. I might be late. I laughed, a short, bitter sound that filled the quiet room. She still thought she was in control. Still thought I was sitting at home like a fool, waiting for her to come back. Eli peered at the screen. Wow, she's really just all in, huh? Yeah, I said, sliding my phone back into my pocket. But so am I. Because what Lorna didn't know was that by the time she came home, she wouldn't be walking back into the same life she had left behind. No, she had made her choice. It was my turn to make mine. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of rage, or sadness, or heartbreak, no. Those emotions had already burned away, leaving something colder, sharper in their place. I was thinking, planning. By the time dawn crept through the blinds of Eli's guest room, I had mapped out my next moves in a way that would make Lorna's carefully constructed plans seem amateurish. She thought she had control.
Oh.
She thought she had me figured out. The devoted husband who would sit around waiting for her to come home, maybe even grovel for an explanation. But what she failed to realize was that for the first time in our marriage, I was the one pulling the strings. First thing I did that morning was call a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, the best. Eli had connections, and within an hour, I was sitting across from a man who practically smelled like victory. His name was Malcolm Greaves, and his presence alone could intimidate the devil. So, Malcolm said, flipping through the folder I had brought with me. Your wife is having an affair, and she's under the impression that you're just going to. What? Wait for her. Seems like it, I said. Malcolm smirked. People like her always. Think they're untouchable until they're not. I liked him already. I laid everything out. The way Lorna had smirked when she told me she was going on a date. The slow withdrawal over the past few months, the arrogance, the lack of remorse. Malcolm listened intently, nodding every so often. Then after a long moment, he leaned back. "This can work in your favor," he said. "You haven't confronted her yet, which means she still thinks she has the upper hand. That's good. Let her believe that the less she suspects, the cleaner this will be." I exhaled. Tension I hadn't even realized I was carrying leaving my body. This was happening. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was acting. That evening I returned home, expected the house to feel different, foreign, after everything that had happened. But it didn't. It felt the same. She was the one who had changed, not me. I stepped inside, shutting the door behind me. The air was thick with the scent of her perfume, a reminder that not long ago she had stood in this very space and told me with a smile that she was leaving to be with someone else. I moved through the house, taking everything in, the framed photos on the wall, the neatly arranged bookshelves, the throw blanket draped over the couch of life that was already crumbling, even if it didn't look like it yet. Then I heard it, the sound of her key in the door. Lorna stepped inside, tossing her purse onto the counter like she hadn't just spent the night with another man. She froze when she saw me. "Oh," she said, surprised. "You're home. Wasn't expecting me to be here. That much was clear." I smiled, leaning casually against the kitchen island. "Where else would I be?" She studied me for a moment, as if trying to gauge my mood, trying to see if I was about to explode, break down, beg. I did none of those things. Instead, I tilted my head. A flicker of something passed over her face, but she covered it quickly, smiling sweetly. "It was great, thanks for asking." I nodded as if I actually cared. Then I gestured toward the dining table, where a stack of papers sat waiting. Her gaze followed my hand, and the moment she saw them, the smirk vanished. "What's this?" she asked slowly. I didn't answer right away. I wanted her to sit in the moment, to feel the walls closing in. Then finally I spoke. "Divorce papers," I said smoothly. "Figured I'd save you the trouble." Her lips parted slightly. She wasn't prepared for this. She had expected a fight. She had expected drama. She had not expected me to be the one calling the shots. "You're serious?" she asked, her voice quieter now. I nodded completely. She let out a breathless laugh, but there was no humor in it. "So that's it? You're just done?" I pretended to think about it, then smiled. "Yep," she stared at me. And for the first time since this all began, I saw panic in her eyes. She had been so sure that I would fight for her, that I would beg for her to stay, that I would be too broken to walk away. She had underestimated me, and now she was realizing it. But it was too late. I turned, heading for the stairs, leaving her standing there in stunned silence, because she wasn't worth another second of my time. Lorna didn't say a word as I walked past her, but I could feel her eyes on me. The tension in the air was almost suffocating, like a storm just waiting to explode. I could hear the shallow hitch in her breath, the slight tremor in her exhales, signs of a woman who had just realized she wasn't as untouchable as she thought. I didn't stop. I didn't turn back. I made my way upstairs, every step echoing in the quiet house, at least for now. When I reached our bedroom, I locked the door behind me, not because I was afraid of her, but because I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of a conversation. She had said all she needed to say. The moment she smirked and told me she was going on a date, everything after that was irrelevant. I sat on the edge of the bed, exhaling slowly. The day had been long, exhausting in ways I hadn't expected. But there was something freeing about this moment. I had made my decision, and she knew it. That alone gave me an upper hand she never anticipated. The sound of movement downstairs told me she hadn't stormed out yet. She was lingering, probably trying to figure out how to spin this in her favor. Lorna was good at that, twisting narratives, making herself look like the victim, turning situations into something they weren't. But this time, she had no leverage. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my messages until I reached Malcolm's name. The conversation from earlier flashed on the screen. Asterisk. Make sure she doesn't suspect anything until everything is finalized. Asterisk, I smirked. She didn't suspect a thing. A knock on the door broke the silence. I ignored it. Another knock this time. More insistent. Still, I didn't move. Finally, her voice came through. Elliot. I closed my eyes briefly. She only used my full name when she wanted something. What? I said, my tone flat. A pause. Can we talk? I let out a quiet breath, shaking my head even though she couldn't see me. Talk? Now she wanted to talk? I had given her every opportunity to communicate before, to tell me if something was wrong, to be honest about what she wanted. Instead, she had chosen to humiliate me, to treat me like an afterthought in my own marriage. And now, the moment she saw I wasn't groveling for her, she wanted a conversation. Typical, I stood up, unlocking the door but not opening it. If she wanted to talk, she could do it on my terms. The second the door cracked open, she pushed her. Way inside, she looked different now. The arrogance from earlier was gone, replaced by something else. Uncertainty. Good. She folded her arms, tilting her head slightly, trying to regain control. So you're just ending things. I met her gaze. Unflinching. Yeah. She exhaled, shaking her head. Come on, Elliot, this is ridiculous. I almost laughed. Ridiculous. She had walked out of our house like a queen on her way to a feast, parading her infidelity in front of me like it was nothing, and now she had the audacity to call this ridiculous? I crossed my arms. What exactly do you think is ridiculous? That I'm not begging you to stay? That I'm not groveling for your attention? Because if that's what you were expecting, you seriously miscalculated. Her lips parted, caught off guard. For the first time, she looked like she didn't have a perfectly rehearsed response. I thought we had an understanding, she muttered after. A beat, her voice quieter now. I raised an eyebrow. An understanding. She hesitated. Marriage isn't black and white, Elliot. It's not some fairy tale where two people stay completely devoted to each other forever. People evolve. Things change, and I thought... She exhaled sharply. ... I thought you'd at least be open-minded. Open-minded. I shook my head, laughing under my breath. Let me get this straight. You think a real marriage means I should sit back while you go out and have your fun? That I should just be okay with you dating other people while I stay at home like a loyal pet? She frowned. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. A flicker of frustration crossed her face, and for the first time, I saw her mask slipping. You're making this harder than it needs to be, she muttered. I took a slow step forward, lowering my voice. No, Lorna, you made this harder the second. You decided I wasn't worth the truth. Her jaw clenched. Oh, so what now? We just throw away everything we built. I tilted my head. You already did. She flinched. Small reaction, but I saw it. I exhaled, finally feeling the exhaustion settle in my bones. I had nothing left to say, nothing left to give her. The divorce is happening, I said. If you want. To pretend this is a shock, go ahead. But don't stand here and act like you didn't choose this. Silence stretched between us. Then, finally, she turned on her heel and walked out of the room. This time, I didn't watch her go. I didn't care anymore, because for the first time in years, I was done fighting for something that was already gone. The moment Lorna left the room, the weight of everything finally settled on my chest. But it wasn't grief. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't even rage anymore. It was liberation. I ran a hand over my face, exhaling slowly. The house was silent now, save for the distant sound of Lorna moving around downstairs. I could hear the clink of glass, shuffle of her shoes against the hardwood floor, little signs of a woman trying to process the unthinkable. In her mind, I was supposed to fight for her. She thought she had me so wrapped around her finger that I'd be desperate to keep her, to convince her that what we had was worth saving. She never once considered that I might have already let her go. I walked over to the window and pulled the curtain back slightly. Outside, the street was quiet, the glow of streetlights casting long shadows over the pavement. It was strange how normal everything looked when my entire world had just shifted. Then I heard her voice, soft at first, muted. Melted. I turned my head slightly, realizing she was on the phone. At first, I wasn't going to listen. I had spent enough time caring about what she had to say, but something about her tone made me pause. It wasn't the confident, smug voice she had used with me earlier. It wasn't laced with the usual arrogance she carried like a shield. Oh, this voice was shaken. I moved closer to the bedroom door, keeping my footsteps silent as I cracked it open, just enough to hear. "I don't know," she whispered harshly. "He's not reacting the way I thought he would." I froze, my grip on the doorknob tightening as my stomach twisted into something cold, something sharp. Who was she talking to? And why did she sound worried? She let out a frustrated sigh. "No, I didn't think he'd be happy about it, but I at least thought he'd put up a fight. He just ... agreed. It's like he doesn't even care." She paused. Then, softer, almost uncertain, she said, "What if I miscalculated?" I nearly laughed. Miscalculated. That was the first intelligent thought she'd had all night. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, letting the conversation continue. There was a long silence, and then she let out a sharp breath. "No, he doesn't know. Why would I tell him? That would ruin everything." Another pause, then her next words sent a slow, creeping fire through my veins. "I'll handle it. Just stick to the plan." The plan. Of course, there was a plan. I should have known. Lorna wasn't the type to risk anything without having a safety net in place. This wasn't just some impulsive decision. This was premeditated, and I wasn't supposed to react this way. I was supposed to beg. I was supposed to argue. I was supposed to be so emotionally wrecked that I wouldn't notice the trap. Too bad for her. I wasn't the man she thought I was. I took a quiet step back, exhaling slowly. My pulse was steady, my mind clearer than it had been in years. Just about infidelity anymore. This was a game, and she thought she was the only one playing. I turned, walking back to the bed and picking up my phone. If she had a plan, it was time I made one of my own, ones she'd never see coming. I had spent the last few days watching Lorna, piecing together the puzzle she never expected me to see. She had a plan. She had set this up long before that night. Long before she stood in front of me and smirked about her date. And the worst part, she had been so sure of herself, so confident that I would react exactly how she wanted me to. But now, she was starting to sweat. I noticed the little things. First, the way she hovered around her phone, checking it constantly. The way she'd start to say something to me, then stop herself, hesitating in a way she never had before. The way she stayed home more, almost as if she was waiting for me to explode, to finally give her the fight she had been counting on. I gave her nothing, and that terrified her, because I wasn't acting like a heartbroken husband. I wasn't screaming or threatening or begging. I was calm. People like Lorna, they don't know what to do with calm. I let her stew in it for 3 days. Then, on the 4th day, I set the final piece into motion. I waited until she was out of the house, then made a few calls. I met with Malcolm again, finalizing the last details of the divorce, one that, thanks to my lawyer's expertise, left nothing in Lorna's favor. I had the house, the assets, and evidence of her infidelity carefully prepared in a file that ensured she wouldn't be able to fight back. By the time I was done, there was no escape route left for her. She had walked into her own trap. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table waiting. My keys were on the counter, a single glass of whiskey in front of me. The front door opened and Lorna stepped inside, stopping short when she saw me. There it was again, hesitation. She was nervous. "Good," I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit." Her jaw tightened, but she did as I asked. I watched her carefully, taking in the slight tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers fidgeted against the table. I slid a folder toward her. She stared at it. "What's this?" "Open it." She hesitated, then reached forward, flipping it open. The moment she saw what was inside, her entire body went still. "You've been planning this," I said casually, leaning back. "In my chair?" I figured it was only fair that I planned something, too. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed, her fingers tightening around the paper. "This is ... double quotes, divorce papers." I cut her off smoothly, analyzed. "And since I was the one betrayed, I made sure they worked in my favor." Her lips parted slightly, and for the first time, I saw fear. Not sadness, not anger, fear. She never thought she'd lose. She never thought I'd be the one to take control. She started, but I held up a hand. Don't, I said. I don't care what excuse you had. I don't care what your plan was. I don't even care who he is. I leaned forward slightly, dropping my voice. I just care that you get the hell out of my house. Her breath hitched. Elliot. This was your choice, I reminded her. You wanted freedom? You have it. You wanted to date other people? Congratulations. You can do that somewhere else. She blinked rapidly, her fingers curling into fists. You don't understand. Oh, I understand. Perfectly, I said coldly. You thought I was weak. You thought I'd fight for you, that I'd be so broken by this that I'd play right into whatever script you had prepared. I tilted my head, but you miscalculated. Silence. Then finally, she let out a shaky breath and laughed. It wasn't a real laugh. It was bitter, breathless, the sound of someone who just lost everything. She shook her head. I guess I did. Why? Stood, grabbing my keys. Pack your things. You're leaving tonight. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She just nodded, looking down at the papers again as if trying to comprehend how she